G'day, Professor Joseph Drew. In this video, I will talk to you about an ideal tax system. We can and we should do so much better than what we do in Australia and throughout most of the Western world. This video draws my recent book, Natural Law and Government, and if you hang on, you'll find out what we should be doing. So we have a problem. We need government. It's as simple as that. The purpose of government, natural law tells us, is to receive the help that is the result of our cooperation. We need to cooperate together for certain things like defence, having a transport network and the like. Now, if you realize you need to cooperate for those things, obviously it's going to involve putting some money into the tax pot. I guess we could all build a little bit of road that runs past our house like they tried to do in the Middle Ages, but I think we'd all build different standards of road and it'd be an absolute disaster. So realistically, we have to pay tax, and it's morally right for our government to demand tax. But the problem is this, that taxes often stop people from being creative and productive. They change behaviors. And also, as Johannes Mesner said, the black and white photo there, and also government has extremely harsh coercive monopoly powers, which they can and will abuse. As Aristotle on the right said, he made a decried the behavior of one of the rulers of the time as a tyrant because he was taxing at 10%. I pay 40-something%, so I only imagine what Aristotle would say about our current government. So this is a problem. We need government, but government has all the power, really draconian powers, and the likelihood is that they will abuse those powers. So if you study the natural law, you can derive 5 principles of a moral ideal tax system. And the first principle is that everyone has a moral duty to pay tax. And this is underscored by Thomas Aquinas. Basically, the argument here is that when we were created, nature was the possession of everyone. This idea of land ownership and ownership of things is a modern concept. We need it because otherwise people would make investments in things if they could be taken away from them. But the way we created was that nature belonged to everyone. We could all take from nature. So if we've got this artificial system of land ownership and property ownership to improve our economic productivity, we need to balance it with a system that allows people to, or obliges people to give back to those who don't get to use nature fully, so that they can still have the type of existence that we're created to have. Number 2, people should keep the fruits of their labours. This is a point that Johannes Mesner makes powerfully, as I said. Why would you put your creative energies in? Why would you go that extra mile if you weren't going to get to keep the products of that work? And you see it a lot. People knock back overtime and knock back extra work because it's just not worth it. If you're going to have to lose half of what you work for in tax, why bother? You're better off, relaxing and investing your time in yourself or your family. Number 3, tax should be incident on the superfluum. What is the superfluum? It's the money you have left over after you provided for your household at the standard to which they are accustomed. This also idea goes back to Aquinas. Now, the proprium is the money you need to provide for your household. We don't want to be taxing that. We want people to be able to provide the necessities of life. What we want to be taxing is that extra money. Number 4, taxes should encourage prudent, virtuous behavior, i.e., they should discourage vice. And unfortunately, our taxes don't make a distinction between virtue and vice, and that's why we have such a vice-ridden society these days. And number 5, taxes should promote proportionate equity. A lot of you won't know what that term means, because in modern times, certainly in the last 50 or 60 years, we've become fixated on numerical equity, whereby everyone gets exactly the same. The classics would have told us that that was a stupid idea. If you're going to reward everyone exactly the same, whether they did something to get themselves in that situation, whether they're trying or not, guess what's going to happen? We're going to descend to this low level of vice-ridden behavior that we see that permeates most of our society at the moment. Indeed, the way the tax system and the welfare system is set up in most Western countries, the more vice you display, the more support and money you'll get from the government. No wonder we've descended to the level that we have descended to. So while I'm on this topic, if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. Please give it the thumbs up. That tells me to make more videos like this one, and the subscriber numbers is how I justify my time. So what would these taxes actually look like? Well, you'd end up with a much simpler tax system, and that's good for equity reasons, because it becomes transparent and everyone can see who's paying what tax and why. At the moment, it's so complex, no one has any idea of who's paying tax. We're pretty sure the really, really rich aren't, and the corporations aren't. We're pretty sure that the really, really poor aren't, but no one really knows in between who's paying what. We want accountability, we want transparency. When we have that, people can see when there's problems and comment on it and take political action to get those problems rectified. At the moment, it's so complex, no one knows how it works or why it works or where it's not working, and hence we never get any change. So the three taxes that you would need that would comply quite closely with these principles from natural law philosophy are an unimproved capital gains tax, an inheritance tax, and vice and luxury taxes. So let's look at unimproved capital gains tax. The idea here is to tax increases in value to things that the person hasn't done anything to bring about. So the classic example is unimproved land taxes, which is what we use for local government in Australia. So you buy a piece of land, do absolutely nothing, and it will go up in wealth. You will get unearned wealth for doing nothing. What's increase the wealth of that land? It's really the actions of the rest of the community. Population growth and new industries and new development and things like this. Why should you get to keep money that you did nothing to earn? That is the best tax, a tax on unimproved capital gains, because the person did nothing to earn it. You're not taking away the fruits of their labour. And in fact, it's morally just that that money is taxed and returned to society at large. So obviously unimproved land, but it also applies to other things. Equities, so shares, art, people invest in wine and things like that, they all go up in value, not because a person's done anything, but because of what else is happening in the economy. Why should they get to keep all of that? So we tax a portion of that unimproved capital gains. The next tax is an inheritance tax. I know it's very unpopular in Australia, but it exists in most countries, and it's a really good tax for the simple reason that it doesn't deprive the person of anything. Death has deprived them of their wealth and their money, not the government tax. It's an ideal tax. It's not going to distort your decision making ordinarily, and it returns value at the end of your life when you're not going to miss it because you're 6 foot under, and where a lot of money has generally been spent on you by the government and the rest of the community. It's a way of you giving that money back. Now, some people say, oh, but my children won't get an inheritance. Well, if your children are sweating on inheritance, probably suggests that they've been very imprudent in their lives. They oughtn't be sweating on inheritance by the time most people die. And these inheritances actually cement and entrench inequity. People from rich families tend to be rich because they get lots of riches bequeathed to them, given to them in the life of their parents and then after their parents die. This is a way of breaking that concentration of wealth and creating a more level playing field. The third type of tax are the vice and luxury taxes. As I say, at the moment in Australia and most Western countries, we reward vice and we tax virtue. That's completely opposite of what we need to be doing. No wonder we have such a vice-ridden society. So if you think smoking is a vice, or drinking to excess is a vice, or using drugs is a vice, well then you tax those things. If you think pornography and use of brothel services is vices, you tax those things, and that will discourage vice-ridden behaviour, encourage virtue. It doesn't stop it or prevent it. If people really want to commit their vices, they're free to do so, but they'll pay a tax and it will increase the price of doing so, because there's usually spillover knock-on effects on other people, of people not living virtuous lives. So it's reasonable that if you want to live like that, you return some money to the rest of the society so that they can, by way of compensation for the ill effects you'll spill over onto them because of your bad behaviour. And luxury taxes. Why are luxury taxes okay? Well, obviously they're incident on the superfluum. It's good to be able to buy luxuries, and I don't want people not to be able to buy it, but if you can afford to buy luxury goods, that's obviously the superfluum. It's money left over that you didn't need to keep your household. So it's reasonable that you pay some of that as a tax in order to return some of that natural bounty to the rest of society. So I should say I go through this in much greater detail in my book, Natural Law and Government. If you want a blueprint for a fairer society, a fairer tax system, grab yourself a copy of that book. You'll see that I'm not proposing that these are 100% taxes. They're a small portion of the value of your luxury item, the value of your vice item, a small portion of the value of your inheritance. Now, part of the problem, part of the reason why we'll never get this just tax system in my lifetime is we have a government that's addicted to debt and a government that's addicted to spending. Now, Henry George was accosted on this point. He proposed a single tax on improved land value. He was wrong, as I've shown. But he was accosted on it, and he said, look, the problem isn't that it's not going to raise enough revenue. The problem is that you're spending too much. And on that point, I agree with Henry George. The other reason why this probably never happened is we have a whole industry, the tax consulting industry, who thrives on the complexity and the unfairness of the tax system. That's how they make their money. That's how they get their revenue. They're not going to roll over and let this one happen. And then we've got the political class who are there and controlled by the elites, and they're there to make things better for the elites. They're not interested in a fair system, a just system, a system that's going to reward virtue, a system that's going to tax luxuries, a system that's going to tax inheritances. So it probably won't happen in my lifetime, but I heartily wish it would. Thank you very much for your time. Goodbye.